It all started a week ago. Someone put a timeout doll at our local playground. If you're not familiar, they're life-size dolls that look like children in timeout or playing hide-and-seek. They lean face-first against the wall, hiding their faces with their hands. You only ever see the back of them. Some are handmade, using old kids' clothes, a hat, a wig, and some straw for stuffing. The first time I saw one at the playground, I thought it was a real kid. So did my 5-year-old. He went up to the thing and asked, "Want to play hide-and-seek?" It didn't move. I watched from the bench, fear sinking in. Why isn't that kid moving? He, or she, it was hard to tell from the longish blonde hair and bucket hat, was leaned against the green plastic tunnel that Ryan liked to crawl through, just standing there, totally still. But as I approached, I saw the plasticky shine of its curly blonde hair, the snow-white neck poking out from the shirt's collar. I raised my hand and, slowly, gave it a poke. It wobbled against the tunnel. It's a doll. My stomach dropped. Is this someone's idea of being cute? It felt like something an 80-year-old granny would do. The type that likes Precious Moments figurines and buys those hyper-realistic baby dolls. Or maybe it's a prank. I could see a group of teenagers leaving it here just to freak out parents. Maybe they hide in the bushes and film people's reactions and put it on their TikTok or something. Either way, it creeped me out. Just standing there, totally still, leaned up against the tunnel like that. Its face lined up perfectly with one of the circular holes cut into the tunnel wall, like it was peering inside. "What is it?" Ryan asked, staring at it. "It's a doll. They call them timeout dolls because they look like they're in timeout," I replied. "Oh." Then he got on his hands and knees, and before I could stop him, scooted into the tunnel. "Ryan! Hi," he said, his voice echoing in the plastic. "Do you want to play?" "Come on." "It has no face. Why does it have no face?" "Come on, get out of there," I said, the uneasiness in my stomach growing. He finally popped his head out and smiled at me. "Can we make sandcastles?" "Sure," I replied. I hated making sandcastles, getting sand all over my jeans. But it was loads better than dealing with this creepy doll. A few days later, when we went back to the playground, it was still there. The after-school crowd was there, running up the jungle gym and racing down the slides. But there was one child that was standing still among the commotion. That stupid doll. It was in the same place as before, leaned against the tunnel. I whipped around, half expecting to see some giggling teenagers filming us. But there were only tired zombie parents glued to their phones, chaotic kids racing across the mulch. I went back to my phone, scrolling through the news. When I looked up a minute later, the doll was in a different place. It was now leaned up against the slide, hiding its face against the green plastic. My heart sank. One of the kids must have moved it, I thought. I glanced around at all the screeching, whooping kids. Right? I waved to Ryan, about to go down the slide, and put my phone away. I didn't want to take my eyes off him anymore. He waved back, grinning toothily, his bright yellow hat sticking out among the crowd. But there is always something to distract us from our kids. Dirty dishes in the sink, unread emails. There's always something tugging at our sleeve, crying for our attention. And for me, today, it was a phone call. As I answered my client's questions about the logo and branding images I'd designed for her, my eyes strayed from the playground. And when I looked back, I couldn't see Ryan anymore. I dropped the phone and stood up. "Ryan!" Nothing. I ran around the side of the playground, and that's when I saw his yellow hat. Not on Ryan, on that fucking timeout doll. It was now leaned against the rock-climbing wall, hands covering its face, shirt softly rippling in the wind. Blonde, shiny curls poking out from my son's hat. My blood ran cold. Animalistic fear pounded through my veins. This is wrong. So wrong. I opened my mouth to scream for Ryan. We switched hats. I whipped around to see Ryan standing there, perfectly fine, wearing the doll's bucket hat. I let out a breath, sunk to my knees. "Thank God you're okay," I said, voice warbling, pulling him in for a hug. "I'm okay," he replied, confused. "Can we go on the swings?" "Okay, but first, let's switch your hats back." Barely looking at the wretched doll, I reached over and yanked off the yellow hat. "Put its hat back on," I told him, and then we made our way to the swings. I spent a while there, just pushing him, enjoying the sunny, if cold, spring day. The tension began to melt away. Ryan was safe, and everything was fine. Eventually, as the sun began to set, we made our way back to the parking lot. As I mentally thought through the steps of preparing dinner, I needed to cut up some carrots, and did we remember to buy heavy cream? Ryan tugged at my sleeve. "Why is it there?" "Number the doll." It was now at the edge of the parking lot, leaning against a tree. One of the kids must have moved it out here." "Why?" "They probably thought it was funny. Come on, let's go." We quickly got in the car and drove home. That night, I decided we'd go to a different playground for a few days. The doll was freaking me out too much. Yeah, maybe it was irrational, but no one said we had to go to that playground. I'd take him to the one in Edgewood tomorrow. As I put Ryan's hat away, I noticed several strands of curly blonde hair stuck inside. Actually, more than several. I pulled them out, my stomach turning a little, and then threw them in the trash. Then I sat down, settled in, and took a sip of tea. Just as I was finally relaxing, I heard Ryan's voice upstairs. "Mom!" I dropped the cup of tea and ran up the stairs. "Mom! Mom!" he continued yelling, fear threading his voice. I burst into the room. Ryan was cowering in the corner of his bed, covers up to his neck. "It's in my closet," he whispered. "What's in your closet?" I asked, fear pounding through me. "The doll. Number, it's got to be a nightmare." I paced towards the closet. The door was ajar, the darkness spilling out of it. With each step, my heart sank further. It can't be. Just a nightmare. I sucked in a breath and swung the door open. Number, it wasn't a nightmare. There, in the darkness, stood the Time Out doll. It was leaned against the hanging clothes, pressing its face into Ryan's shirts. Its blonde curls shone softly in the darkness. I raced over to Ryan and picked him up out of bed. "We're getting out of here," I said, charging out of the room and towards the stairs. It wasn't a possessed doll. Those don't exist. Someone had put the doll there, which meant someone was in our house. Marc. It could be Marc. Some sort of sick, twisted way to get back at me for getting the house in the settlement. Did he still have the keys? I raced down the stairs, Ryan bobbing with each step. When I got to the landing, I glanced back. No. The doll was at the top of the stairs now. Face pressed into the wall, I raced to the front door, grabbed the doorknob, yanked it open. Glanced back. The doll was on the landing. And was that a shadow next to it? Someone standing there. I ran across the front yard, towards the neighbor's house. I pounded on the door, crying, "Let me in! Someone broke into our house, please!" As I took a final glance at our house, I saw the doll leaned against the oak tree in our front yard. The police didn't find anything. No doll, no evidence of a break-in. With nothing to go on, they left, telling me they'd call if they got in touch with Marc. Ryan and I are staying at a friend's house for a few days, while we get our bearings and try to figure out what's going on here. But I'm worried. Because last night, when I went to check on Ryan to see if he was asleep yet, I found an empty bed. Ryan was standing in the corner of the room, leaning against the wall, hands over his face. "What are you doing?" I whispered, tugging at his arm. "Go back to bed. Now." He turned towards me, hands still pressed against his eyes. "He isn't in timeout, Mommy," he said. I stopped in my tracks. "What?" "He's playing hide and seek," he continued. "Now he's hiding, and it's my turn to seek." Everyone says my hometown doesn't exist. I'm beginning to believe them. But that doesn't mean that was always the case. Let me back up. The first time I encountered this bizarre denial was after my first semester at college. I trekked to the Amtrak station, luggage in tow, and asked the attendant for one ticket to Casey Falls, Michigan, please. She looked up from her desk and blinked. "Where?" "Casey Falls, Michigan," I repeated, a smidge slower this time. After she performed a search on her computer, then sought counsel from her manager, they determined that if Casey Falls was a real place, it wasn't a stop on any of their lines. "How can that be?" I protested. I could see its train station as clearly in my mind's eye as their bewildered faces before me. Every spring break, I took the train with my family into Chicago, boarding at 7 o'clock in the morning at the platform just east of Berry Street. Dad would hand me $2 to buy a Coke and a bag of pretzels from the vending machines before the train arrived. My younger sister Janie and I sat impatiently on the benches, waiting for our journey to begin. But relaying this memory to the exasperated attendants did little to correct their system, which omitted Casey Falls from its available destinations. I spent that Christmas alone in my dorm, desperately trying to get a hold of my family, but none of them answered. Mom, Dad, sister, phone, email, text, Facebook, nothing. Even stranger was that, overnight, their online presence vanished. Erased socials, bounced emails. When I called again, a recording informed me that the numbers I was trying to reach had been disconnected. What is going on? The following 2 weeks, ordinarily spent opening presents, reconnecting with high school friends, ringing in the new year, were instead subsumed under my intense investigation. I scrubbed the internet for any mention of my hometown. I came up empty-handed. Despite endless hours scouring Google, Yahoo, even Bing, I found no mention of the central Michigan burg, ensconced in forest, home to Casey Falls Army Training Camp and the defunct collapsed copper mines. Even Google Maps erased Casey Falls from its records. Where ordinarily I would see the cluster of homes and farms in Main Street, there was only a green swath of forest land. My hometown had literally been wiped off the map. Worse yet, it was beginning to disappear from my own memory. As break rolled on and my ceaseless search failed to yield a shred of evidence of my hometown's existence, I noticed my own recollection of it fading. While staring bleary-eyed at the television on New Year's Eve, watching revelers crowd Times Square to watch the Spangled Ball drop, I realized I couldn't remember any previous New Year's Eve. How had I spent them in Casey Falls? Maybe it was common to forget a few, for their memories to bleed into one another, to mix up which party went with which year, but to lose every New Year's Eve from one's personal history. I felt hollow, and in the void where Casey Falls and my preceding 18 years of memories should have been, something dark and sinister lurked. When my roommate returned in January and saw that I'd been holed up in our dorm for the entire break, he naturally inquired what happened. What happened indeed, was my mad response. Desperate for a memory of home, even if secondhand, I interrogated Sean. "Surely you remember me talking about home at some point, right?" I asked. And while he agreed that, surely, in our various 2 a.m. chats, we must have touched on the subject, he was chagrined to admit nothing specific returned. The silver lining to this distressing chat was that I now had a partner. Sean, fascinated by my absent origin, took up the cause with me. He caught up quick, performing his own research online before arriving at the conclusion that we had to see for ourselves. So, on a weekend in late January, he drove us in his junky sedan into the heart of the mitten, to where Casey Falls should have carved out a space for itself from the surrounding forest. To my horror, we found only trees. Where Main should have intersected with Blanchard, there was only a dirt drive reaching back into the woods. Sean didn't think his car would handle the uneven road too well, but after some pleading, he acquiesced. We drove slow along the forested road, tree branches squeezing us into a tunnel of foliage. "Right here," I said. "Casey Falls should be right here." I leapt out of the car and raced through the woods. I'm not sure why. I don't think it was rational, just my emotions taking control, a medley comprising anger, grief, confusion, fear that propelled me through the underbrush until I tripped over something metal. I turned back to find a green box, like a geocache, resting on the forest floor. Inside, pages yellowed with age featured some sort of code scrawled across them, written with only half-decent penmanship. "What the hell is that?" asked Sean when he finally caught up to me. It was the question we tried pairing with an answer over the ensuing month. Neither of us were real code breakers, so we shopped the pages around campus, taking it to math nerds and professors in the hopes one of them might crack it. One by one, they tried their best to decipher the documents, but each one met invariably with defeat. One professor called it the toughest code she'd ever encountered, while another suggested in all likelihood the pages were rubbish. But the fact that I'd found it where my hometown should have been kept me from accepting the latter explanation. Something was written in those pages, something that helped explain what happened to Casey Falls. But I'll never uncover its secrets, because on March 3rd, someone tore our dorm room apart, and the only thing they took with them was the coded pages. Spooked by this flagrant invasion of privacy, Sean told me he would pursue the Casey Falls mystery no further. He believed that by showing the documents around campus, we'd attracted the attention of the feds, CIA, NSA, some other three-letter agency no one had ever heard of, and now we were being watched. "Whatever happened to your hometown," Sean said, "they don't want anyone to find out." The next week, Sean transferred out, enrolling in a school on the East Coast. He left without saying goodbye, another exit without ceremony. I've since taken a barista job to be able to stay in Chicago through the summer, since I've got nowhere else to go. While reckoning with the fact I've become an orphan, in every sense of the word, I can't help shaking the feeling that someone is watching me. Whatever happened to Casey Falls, it wasn't good. I can feel it in my bones, the unheard screams of family and neighbors vibrating in the marrow. I feel them, and it makes me sick, but I cling to the horror because it's all I have left of home. My husband is a painter. Well, that's a stretch. He does very modern, Jackson Pollock-style art. I've seen him in the studio, and he's not so much painting as he is flinging paint at the canvas with his bare hands. Strangely, though, people pay real money for his work. His most recent one, gray and blue splatters on a gray canvas entitled Ocean Dawn, fetched us a cool $3,000. He makes a full salary off his work, and then some. I don't get it. Maybe the people who buy his work are smarter or more cultured than me. They all fit a very specific type: well-dressed men with distinguished salt and pepper hair, petite blonde wives that look like they've never eaten a slice of cake in their lives. Money to burn, put on the dog types. Although, if it's a choice between one of my husband's paintings and a Louis Vuitton purse, well, his paintings are, marginally, less ugly than those purses. Man, what is it with rich people and ugly stuff? Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent here. The reason why I'm writing this is because my husband has been away for the past 2 weeks visiting family. While he's been gone, I've been running the business by myself, and I've noticed some odd things. His studio is a really nice space downtown, large and full of light, filled ceiling to floor with his paintings, and even though they're individually ugly, There's something sort of beautiful about them being all together. The different colors and splattering types all match and coordinate with each other. It's obvious they're all done by the same artist. Maybe that's why he makes money off them. They have a distinct style. You can point to one and say, with certainty, that's a Theodore Waters painting. The thick globs of paint, the colors that don't really go with each other, that's a Waters right there. I could put on a smock and throw paint at a canvas while listening to Gregorian chants too, but I wouldn't be able to produce paintings that consistently resembled each other in style. The first few days went well. We had a minor hiccup. I almost gave the woman buying Evening Tranquility the wrong painting. They looked identical to me, but I was enjoying it. After work, I'd head to the studio for a few hours and binge dramas on Hulu, waiting for the next client to come by. Things took a turn for the worse, however, on Wednesday night. My iPad ran out of battery 20 minutes before the last client was supposed to show up. So I just sat there, staring at the paintings. I got up and rearranged them a little. I pulled out the piece that was supposed to be sold tonight, Midnight Dream. It was one of the less ugly ones, if only for its color scheme. Black canvas, or possibly navy blue, splattered with purple, mauve, indigo, and white, and just a few dots of ocean blue drizzling across the front. I leaned it against the other paintings and sat back at the desk, taking off my glasses and rubbing my eyes. Damn allergies. When I looked back up, however, I froze. With my glasses off, Midnight Dream was now blurry, and with all the random splatters blurred now, I could see a clear shape. How there were less splatters, more darkness, in the center of the canvas. That looked exactly like the silhouette of a person. A person leaned over the viewer, staring down at them. What the? I put my glasses back on, but with all the clear dots and drizzles and specks, I could only barely make out the image. Was that why people were buying Theodore's paintings? Because there was a second, hidden image? It didn't make sense, though. I'd seen Theodore making some of these paintings. He was randomly flinging paint on a canvas, listening to those calming Gregorian chants, or whatever they were. There was no way he could plan where the paint fell to create a second image, unless he was somehow going back and painting over some of the paint splatters later. Though I didn't see any brushstrokes to imply that. I got up and pulled out another one of Theodore's paintings, entitled Pink Marble, splatters of pink and red and white. I leaned it against Midnight Dream, stepped back, and took off my glasses. It was a hand covered in splatters of blood. My stomach did a little flip. I felt nauseous. It's just art, I told myself. People do extreme art all the time. What about that one where that giant guy is eating a man? That's like in an art museum and everything, right? Nothing wrong with painting a bloody hand. Nothing wrong with painting a shadow person glaring down at you. And maybe I was wrong. There wasn't much detail in these images, just the suggestion of forms. It could be pareidolia, my brain assigning familiar shapes to the paintings, like a Rorschach test. Maybe these were random blobs, and it was just my imagination. I took out another painting. This one was pretty ugly. Muddy shades of brown and green around the edges, a big pink blob in the middle. Spring Blooms was the title. I leaned it against Pink Marble and stepped back. Closed my eyes, let out a breath. Took off my glasses. I opened my eyes. Oh no. The pinkish blob, now blurred and at a distance, was clearly the shape of a woman's body, laying on the ground, splattered with blood. Why would he paint this? And who would buy this? Who would want a painting of a dead body in their home? I swallowed, my throat dry. I put on my glasses and slid the painting back in with the others stacked up. Was this the reason Theodore was actually making money? He was selling these paintings to sickos that were camouflaged well enough to stay hung up through dinner parties and visits from the in-laws. I texted the client who was supposed to pick up Midnight Dream and told them I wasn't feeling well. Then I drove home, stomach twisting, and locked myself inside. But I didn't exactly feel safe in the house either, because Theodore had a few of his own paintings hanging on our walls. I realized now, as I viewed them from a distance, that the painting in our living room depicted a close-up of a woman's face. But something black was oozing out of her mouth. Vomit? A spider? Not enough detail to tell. And the huge one in our bedroom, hanging above our bed, looked like two lovers embracing, except they appeared dead from the ashen-gray tint of their bodies. This was sick, and it didn't even make sense. I remembered when Theodore painted this one, the one of the lovers. I had watched him for more than an hour. He was just flinging paint randomly as he listened to the weird chanting music he always played. Yet the blobby shapes clearly suggested two people embracing. I decided to sleep in the guest room that night. But before I did, I made the mistake of walking into Theodore's home studio. I'd left the lights on somehow, so I stepped into the studio, my heart pounding. It was a lot more cramped than the one downtown, only about 100 square feet, with a huge stack of paintings in the corner. As I reached for the light switch, I noticed the unfinished piece on the easel. I'd seen it several times over the last few weeks, but now I saw it differently. I took off my glasses and took a few steps back, out into the darkened foyer. It was a woman, lying on a dark wooden floor, splattered in blood. Except that woman was me. Of course, I couldn't be sure. There wasn't enough detail. But from the colors, that looked like my favorite gray sweater, my hair splayed out on the floor. I backed away. Then I ran out of the house. I drove all night until I got to a friend's place. That's where I am now. Theodore has tried to call me, but I've let all his calls go to voicemail. Every time I close my eyes, I see the painting, the splatters of paint that look just like my dead body.